The call came at 2:47 inches the afternoon on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I was staring at my computer screen when the room tilted, and the last thing I saw before my legs gave out was the timestamp on the spreadsheet I'd been building for 6 hours. Quarterly projections for a client presentation due Friday. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I hadn't saved in 40 minutes. Then the floor came up to meet me. I woke up in the back of an ambulance with an oxygen mask over my face and a paramedic named Dennis telling me to stay still. He had kind eyes, and he was squeezing my hand. I asked him what happened. He said I'd been found unconscious in the break room at my office. I asked if someone had called my husband. He said the emergency contact on file with my employer was my mother. That was the first problem. My husband, Daniel, and I had moved from Phoenix to Denver 8 months earlier when he got promoted to regional director. In the chaos of unpacking boxes, updating our address with 17 different agencies, switching utilities, enrolling in new doctor's offices, I had missed one thing, just one. The HR emergency contact form at my new job. I had meant to update it. I kept a sticky note on my monitor that said, "Update HR Daniel" for 6 weeks until I finally got so used to seeing it that I stopped seeing it at all. So when I hit the floor in the break room at Meridian Financial Group, my colleague Priya found me and called 911, and the paramedics contacted the person on my file, who was still listed as my mother, Patricia. I found this out from Dennis on the way to St. Luke's Medical Center. I told him to try to reach my husband instead. He said they'd keep attempting. My mother answered on the second ring. I know this because Dennis had me on the phone with her almost immediately. They wanted family aware, they said, because the preliminary assessment showed internal bleeding, possibly from a fall I'd taken 3 days earlier when I slipped on ice in our driveway. I had brushed it off. I had taken ibuprofen and gone to work the next morning. Apparently that was a mistake. "Mom," I said. My voice came out thin and strange. "I'm in an ambulance. They think I have internal bleeding. I need you and Dad to come to St. Luke's." My parents lived 40 minutes away, in the same suburb where I grew up. They had followed us to Denver retired, looking for something to do with themselves, pleased to be near family. 40 minutes. That's all it would have taken. There was a pause on her end. Then, I heard my brother's voice in the background. My brother, Ryan, is 24 years old. He works part-time at a sporting goods store and lives in my parents' basement. He has never, in his entire life, encountered a problem he could not escalate into a theatrical production. My mother said, "Oh honey, oh no. The thing is Ryan just got a parking ticket and he is absolutely devastated right now." I actually pulled the oxygen mask off my face to make sure I had heard her correctly. Dennis gently put it back. "Mom, I just said internal bleeding." I know. But it's $220, Claire. He parked in a handicapped spot by accident, and you know how Ryan gets. He's been crying for an hour. I don't know what he'll do if we leave him right now. $220. My brother received a parking ticket for $220 because he parked in a handicapped spot, and that was the reason my mother could not drive 40 minutes to the hospital where I was being taken by ambulance for suspected internal bleeding. I did not say anything for a moment. "Is he dying?" I finally asked. "What? No. Of course not. He's just..." "Then I need you to come to the hospital." She said she'd try to wrap things up and be there as soon as she could. She said it the way you say you'll try to make it to a school play you have no intention of attending. I handed the phone back to Dennis. He looked at me with those kind eyes and did not say a single word, which I appreciated. At St. Luke's, they ran a CT scan within 20 minutes of my arrival. Dr. Okonkwo, a soft-spoken trauma surgeon with reading glasses perpetually pushed up on her forehead, sat beside my bed and explained that I had a small but active bleed near my spleen, likely from the fall 3 days ago, worsened by the 6 hours I'd spent hunched over a keyboard. It wasn't immediately life-threatening, she said, but it wasn't nothing. They needed to monitor it closely, and possibly perform a minimally invasive procedure to stop it if it didn't stabilize on its own. She asked if my emergency contact had been reached. I said my husband was being contacted. She asked if anyone would be coming to sit with me. I said I wasn't sure. At 3:31 inches the afternoon, Priya arrived. She had taken an Uber from the office. She walked in carrying a bad cup of hospital cafeteria coffee and a chocolate bar she'd bought from the vending machine downstairs, and she sat in the chair beside my bed and said, "Okay, I'm here. What do you need?" I told her what was happening. She held my hand. She did not tell me her parking ticket-related emotional crises. I made a mental note to get her a very good gift card. At 4:05 inches the afternoon, I called my mother. She said they were almost ready to leave. At 4:43 inches the afternoon, I called my mother again. She said Ryan had calmed down a little but was asking if they could stop to get food on the way because he hadn't eaten since breakfast, and it would only add 15 minutes. I hung up. At 5:12 inches the afternoon, Dr. Okonkwo came back. The bleed had not stabilized. They were going to proceed with the procedure. She needed to review the consent paperwork with me. I was conscious and fully competent to sign for myself, she made clear, which I remember thinking was an odd thing to specify, until I realized later how many people had apparently complicated things by assuming otherwise. I signed my own paperwork. At 5:18 my phone rang. It was Daniel. He had been in a site visit outside Boulder, in an area with terrible cell reception. He'd gotten a garbled voicemail from Dennis, and another from Priya. He was already in his car. He was driving 90 miles an hour, he said, and I told him to please not do that. He said, "Fine, 85. He walked into my room at 6:02 inches the afternoon, still in his work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he crossed the room in about 3 steps and took my face in his hands and looked at me for a long moment without saying anything. Then he sat down in the chair where Priya had been, and he took my hand, and he looked at the IV in my arm and the monitoring equipment and the untouched cup of water on the table beside me, and he said, "Where are your parents?" I told him. He was quiet for a moment. "The parking ticket," he said. $220, I said. "Handicapped spot." He nodded slowly, the way he does when he is processing information he finds genuinely difficult to believe. "Has Ryan ever, in his life," Daniel said, "gotten a parking ticket before?" "3 times that I know of. And he's 24. He's 24. Daniel looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he looked back at me. "Okay," he said. "I'm here. How are you feeling?" That was my husband. He didn't perform. He didn't make speeches. He just sat down and held my hand and asked how I was feeling. And that was the moment I started crying. Not from fear, not from pain, but from the specific, exhausting relief of finally having someone in the room who was actually there for me. My parents arrived at 6:47 inches the evening. My mother walked in first, still in her coat, and she looked at me in the hospital bed and said, "Oh, you look fine. You look totally fine." As if the presence of the IV and the monitoring equipment, and the fact that I had just had a procedure 2 hours earlier, was a minor aesthetic detail. My father stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets. He glanced at Daniel. He glanced at me. He said, "So everything's okay then?" I said I'd had internal bleeding and a procedure, and I needed to stay overnight for observation. My mother said, "Well, you should have gone to the doctor when you fell. I told you about walking on ice without proper shoes." Daniel stood up from his chair. He is not a confrontational person. In 4 years of marriage, I have almost never seen him raise his voice. He has a quality that I can only describe as deliberate. He thinks before he speaks. Always, and when he does speak, it lands. He said, "Patricia, Robert, Claire was in an ambulance at 2:47 this afternoon. She called you from that ambulance. You arrived at 6:47. That is 4 hours." My mother started to say something about Ryan. Daniel said, "I don't want to hear about Ryan. Your daughter was alone in a hospital for 4 hours. Priya, her coworker, came straight from the office. I drove from Boulder. You live 40 minutes away. My father said, now son. I'm not your son, Daniel said, very calmly. I am Claire's husband, and I need you to understand that what happened today is not okay. They stayed for 22 minutes. My mother straightened my blanket twice, in a way that was meant to look caring. My father talked about traffic on the highway. Ryan, apparently, had gone out with friends and was feeling better. I was discharged the next afternoon with strict instructions to rest, not lift anything, and come back immediately if I felt any abdominal pain. Daniel drove me home. He had already stocked the refrigerator with things I liked, and set up the couch the way I preferred it, and put my heating pad on the coffee table. I did not think much about what had happened for the next few weeks. I was tired. I was recovering. I went back to work on a reduced schedule. I updated my emergency contact form at HR Daniel's name, Daniel's cell, Daniel's work number, Daniel's everything. But something had shifted. I'd been helping my parents financially for 3 years by that point. Not enormously, I wasn't supporting them. They had retirement income, but I covered their car insurance because my father had gotten a rate increase after a minor accident. And I paid for their streaming subscriptions because my mother found the billing confusing. And I sent a few $100s every few months when something came up. A broken appliance, a vet bill for their dog, once a plane ticket to visit my aunt. I should be honest, regularly helped Ryan. Money for rent when he was between jobs. Money to fix his car. Money for a speeding ticket, different from the parking ticket. This was a separate occasion the year before. I had never kept a careful accounting of all of this. After the hospital, I did. Over the course of 3 years, I had given my parents and Ryan a combined total of approximately $14,200. That number took me a Saturday morning and a cup of coffee to calculate, sitting at my kitchen table with my bank statements spread out in front of me. And when I arrived at it, I sat there for a long time just looking at it. Daniel came in, saw my face, and asked what was wrong. I showed him the spreadsheet. He sat down. We talked for 2 hours that Saturday morning, the kind of real, honest conversation that is uncomfortable in the moment and necessary in the long term. Daniel had never told me to stop helping my family. He believed in being generous. But he also said, gently, that generosity works best when it flows both directions, even if not equally, and that what he'd seen in that hospital room had told him something important about how the people I was helping thought about me. I called my mother the following Monday and told her I was taking a break from the financial support. I said it calmly, without drama, the way you'd announce a change in plans. I said Daniel and I were focusing on our own savings, and that going forward, they should plan their expenses without counting on contributions from me. My mother said she understood. Then she called back 40 minutes later and said Ryan needed help with his car insurance renewal and could I just do that one more time. I said no. She said, after everything we've done for you? I didn't answer that. I said goodbye and hung up. What followed was 2 months of intermittent Cold War calls that ended abruptly, Sundays that felt loaded with unsaid things, a family dinner in February where my mother made a pointed comment about people who forget where they came from. Ryan looked at his phone the entire meal. My father said nothing. The way he always said nothing. Then came the Meridian Financial Group annual awards banquet. I should give some context. Meridian is a mid-sized firm, but it takes its annual banquet seriously. It's held at the Hyatt downtown. There's a catered dinner. There are actual awards with actual weight to them. My manager, Susan, had submitted my name for the Employee Excellence Award because of the Henderson account, a complicated restructuring project I'd led that had saved the client a significant amount of money and, more importantly to Meridian, brought in a referral that became one of their largest new accounts in years. I didn't know I'd won until Susan called me the week before the banquet and told me to prepare a few remarks. Here's where I need to be clear. I did not plan what happened next as revenge. I want to be honest about that. I didn't spend 2 months engineering a moment of public humiliation for my family. What I did was spend 2 months being privately furious, and then I was given a microphone in a room full of people, and I made a decision in real time that I have not regretted. Daniel and I arrived at the banquet together. He was in the dark blue suit I like. I was in a green dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. We found our table, said hello to my colleagues, ate the salad course. My parents were there because I had invited them 2 weeks earlier, before the Cold War had fully thawed, in a moment of wanting to believe things could still be normal. They were seated at the same table, along with my Aunt Linda, who had driven up from Colorado Springs, and Ryan, who was wearing the only blazer he owned, and had already identified the location of the open bar. The awards portion of the evening began at 8:30. Susan introduced me warmly. She talked about the Henderson account, about the quality of my work, about what my contribution had meant to the firm. People applauded. I walked to the podium. I looked out at the room. 200 people, colleagues and clients and guests, everyone holding wine glasses and looking at me with polite, expectant faces. I looked at the index card in my hand with the 3 modest, professional talking points I had prepared. I put the index card down. "Thank you," I said. "This is genuinely meaningful to me, and I want to explain why." I talked about the Henderson project. I talked about the 6 months of late nights, and the problem solving and the team members who had supported me. That part took about 90 seconds, and I meant every word of it. Then I said, 8 months ago, I moved to Denver, and I want to talk for just a moment about what it means to build a life somewhere new, because I think it's relevant to what this award represents to me. I paused. When I moved here, I said, I learned something important about who shows up for you. Not in a general way. In the very specific way, where you're in an ambulance at 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon, and you find out, in real time, who considers that a priority. The room was quiet in the way rooms get when something unexpected is happening. My husband drove from Boulder in under an hour, I said. My coworker Priya took an Uber directly from the office. I looked toward their table and meant it. They showed up. And I have spent the last several months understanding, for the first time, with real clarity, what it means when the people you've invested in financially, emotionally, consistently decide that a $220 parking ticket is a more compelling reason to stay home than a call from their daughter in an ambulance. Dead silence. I was not looking at my parents' table. I was looking at the back of the room, just above everyone's heads, the way you look when you need to stay steady. I'm not telling this story to embarrass anyone, I said, which was mostly true. I'm telling it because this award is about showing up, doing the work, being present for the people and the projects and the moments that matter. And I have never been more motivated to do that than I am right now, because I know exactly how it feels when someone doesn't. I picked up the award. Thank you, I said. I walked back to my table. Daniel put his hand over mine immediately. Priya, 2 seats down, was looking at me with an expression I could not entirely read, but that included something like awe. My Aunt Linda appeared to be staring at the tablecloth. I did not look at my parents for a long time. When I finally did, my mother was holding her wine glass with both hands and looking at the centerpiece. My father was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Not anger exactly, but something quieter and more complicated than that. Ryan had apparently gone to the bar. No one said anything to me that evening about what I had said. My mother texted me at 11:15 that night. It said, I can't believe you did that in front of everyone. I read it and put my phone down and went to sleep. My father called the next morning. I answered, because my father almost never calls me texting, is my mother's domain. Silence is his. He said, I owe you an apology. I sat down. He said it again. I owe you an apology, Claire. What your mother and I did not coming to the hospital, I've been thinking about it since that night you told us, and I've been thinking about it more since last night. And I don't have a good explanation. I don't have one. Ryan was upset, and I let your mother make the call, and I should have made it myself, and I should have made it differently. It was the longest speech my father had delivered in my presence in years. I said, Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. He said, I know things have been strained. I know you stopped the financial help. I understand why. I'm not calling to ask about that. I know. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. We talked for 11 more minutes about other things: the weather, a home repair project he was working on, a documentary he'd watched, ordinary things. A door cracked back open, not all the way, not immediately, but a crack. My mother did not call for 3 weeks. When she finally did, she opened with, "I've been doing a lot of thinking," which in my experience is the sentence that precedes either a genuine reckoning or an elaborate justification, and you never know which one until it's too late. But this time it was the former, cautious, imperfect, punctuated by moments of defensiveness she caught herself in and backed away from. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't understood how serious the situation was, which I let go because the alternative was arguing about whether a call from an ambulance requires clarification. I said, "I need you to understand that Daniel is my family. He is my first call. He is my emergency contact. He is the person I build my life with. That has to be something you and Dad actually understand, not just acknowledge." She said she understood. We are, at the time I'm telling you this, in what I would call a cautious reconstruction. Not fully healed. Not back to normal. Normal was what produced that Tuesday in November, and I have no interest in returning to it. But something new, with clearer edges and more honest terms. I have not resumed the financial support. I don't think I will for a long time, maybe ever, not because I'm punishing anyone, but because I looked at that spreadsheet and understood that the money was filling a space where reciprocity should have been, and that filling that space with money had allowed everyone, including me, to pretend the reciprocity was there. It wasn't a gift, it was a substitute, and I'm not interested in substitutes anymore. Ryan got another parking ticket in February. I know because my mother mentioned it. I said, "That's too bad." We moved on to another topic. Last month, Daniel and I bought a house. We have a guest room, and we have talked about who will be welcome in it, and how often, and on what terms. These are conversations we probably should have had 3 years ago, and the fact that we are having them now is its own kind of progress. The Henderson client sent a bottle of wine to the office after the banquet. Priya and I drank most of it on a Friday afternoon after everyone else had gone home. I updated my emergency contact form again last week, just to confirm. Daniel James Whitfield. Cell. Work. Both numbers. It had been right all along. It just took me a while to make everything else match.